Other yellow hat guy here, back with another video. And before we get back into the video games, I want to talk something a little different today. I wanted to talk music. As you can tell by the background, I'm showing 3 out of the 4 members of the Smashing Pumpkins. If I move a little bit, you can see James Iha. So you've got James, Jimmy, Jeff, and Billy. So for a while, Billy has been pretty much who you think of as the lead singer and the face of the Smashing Pumpkins, but he would like you to believe otherwise, like, other band members have input and this, that, and the third, but at the same time we know that the actual Pumpkin sound, you could largely say he could mimic or replicate with just him and the drummer. Now, I'm not in the band, obviously, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you what's fact or what's fiction about, or what's fact, about what's going on in there, and I'm going to try not to bring up fiction either when it comes to the, workings of the band. All I know is on the outside as a fan, what Billy is saying to us, and then what the band, Billy is actually doing. So we'll talk about those two things, because you can tell by the title what I'm going to talk about here. All right, so I'm going to give a little backstory, and then we're going to get into what he actually said. So first off, Smashing Pumpkins are a band. They started out in Chicago. I want to say late 80s, but early 90s is when they became pretty much on the radio waves, a major staple in the alt-rock movement. So they had songs on the radio like Today, Cherub Rock. They had an album that was indie called Gish, and they were often compared with bands like Nirvana, even though they had like different sounds. But they could never seem to get over that shadow, and that led to some depression amongst the lead singer and things like that. So they had a follow-up album, Siamese Dream, which was a classic, and it gave us songs like Today. It gave us Hummer, Quiet, Rocket. A lot of their staples that when you think of Smashing Pumpkins, you think of those songs. Now, only a couple of those end up being singles, so you don't really know about them unless you're, real fans. So Billy has this idea of what real fans are, and that's what we're going to talk about. Because am I a real fan? Are you a real fan? I started out becoming a fan. I would hear those songs that I mentioned before, right, on the radio. But that didn't make me a fan. The radio force feeds you what you think you like or dislike. There's lots of examples of songs that you may have, heard on the radio and you're like, not really feeling it. But you hear it 100 times, suddenly it gets stuck in your head. It's the earworm, and now you suddenly like it. Let's walk back to when younger Leonard was a kleptomaniac, stealing, whatever he could, Ninja Turtles, eventually CDs, right? For those of you who don't know what a CD is, a CD was the follow-up to tapes. I'm not going to explain all that, but the CDs, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. So, not really growing up into rock and roll like that. I had some friends who were, and I was at, I don't even remember what store it was, but I was trying to get Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style. I was trying to steal that album. Yes, I know. Not proud of it, but that's what I was doing younger in life. Stealing is bad. I have to say that for those of you who watch and think that that's a cool thing to do. But long and short, I wanted Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style, but I had to look both ways, make sure nobody was looking at what I was doing, right? You always have cameras in stores, but not like you have them now, right? Everybody's got cameras. I'm talking to you from the camera because as of this recording, cameras are pretty cheap. They're affordable. It's common to have a camera, if not for streaming or making videos, but like an actual personal camera to record what's going on in your household. I say that to say that wasn't the thought of people who stole back in that time. You know, street lights, sure, but not in regular stores, not in every aisle, and certainly not going after small children who are doing this, right? Everyone's looking at adults who know better, but small children, it's like, ma'am, your son or daughter is stealing, but usually they knew that that's what was going on, and people didn't make a big deal out of it because I guess maybe they empathized that they were kids too. But moving on, I was trying to get Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style and didn't really care if I got anything else at the same time. It's just grab what you can and move on and see if you like it when you get home. Worst case, you could trade it with somebody else who has something you want, and you know. So this, you can see, is a double disc CD, 2 CDs in it, and this is, according to Billy, their Wall, Smashing Pumpkins' Wall being like the Pink Floyd album. That was a double album. He was trying to do that, and this was like kind of this had a different tone to it. There's some piano in here. You know, you had the Tonight Tonight single, you know, that song, it just forever is in my consciousness. I had seen nothing like it. There was an orchestra. This was a hard rock band that had Bullets with Butterfly Wings as a song. And then suddenly there's this video of this pleasant Disney-esque, you know, take on this older movie, one of the first movies ever made, Man on the Moon, like a Jules Verne, where he describes how, you know, a trip to the moon would be before we actually went to the moon, you know, decades before we went to the moon, the idea of how we would do it. He had that in a book or something like that, and it was a movie, and this was Billy's, you know, idea of that with that video. So that video back when MTV showed videos was iconic. I would love to see that video in 4K remastered. Maybe that's on YouTube somewhere. But to go further, this was one of the albums that changed what I thought a band could be, number one, and then just, you know, introduced me to different ideas of what music could be. Because, you know, I thought a band had one sound and that's all you were going to get. Sure, they had ballads and, you know, they had, you know, slower songs, but the sound was pretty much them, right? But they could interlope between, you know, some piano to some synth pop to, you know, heavy metal to just a straight up rock sound. And although Billy is not the best singer in the world, he's very great and underrated when it comes to his ability to shred on guitars and just play on, you know, a plethora of different instruments. And after discovering both of these albums, I went back into their catalog and found out there was a bunch of other songs that they had that I like Mayonnaise, one of my favorite songs ever by them. Never got real radio play. It wasn't a single. It wasn't meant to be, but it's a very deep song that when you hear it, you're just like, man, at your lowest of lows, this is describing from a human experience of just wanting to be yourself. And when you're young and you're a teenager and you feel like you're doing everything that other people want you to do, this song kind of describes that feeling, at least to me. So what Billy was great at, the Pumpkins were great at, was utilizing themes of depression and making it artistic. So when you take all that into consideration, I mean, they even had a B-sides album where the B-sides, some of them could have passed for A-sides. They just had so much material that was, you know, underappreciated, and you just didn't know unless you were a fan. So you go from that to when the band broke up. Late 2000 or early 2000s they broke up, and then I'm going to say mid 2000s, 2006, 2007 they get back together, but except it's not the original members. It's Billy and Jimmy, the drummer, Jimmy Chamberlain, and they don't reveal who the other members are going to be. It's rumored that, hey, maybe they do get James and Darcy back, but they aren't saying anything. Maybe there's an NDA or something, or maybe they're still trying to work out deals, but they don't say anything. So publicly there's no record of what was going to happen, but we had two different people who also weren't confirming that they were in the band. You just had to show up at the live show. That was part of the mystique, the allure, the hype, was to see who they were going to get to play these songs. Because again, the idea here, if you were on some of these forums, these I forget what the names of them are, but I was on them. Some of these forums, you had dissension between fans who liked the earlier music and didn't want the band to come back because they thought it would suck, but then when the band came back, people already made up their minds on whether they were excited that the band was back and making music because they wanted chances to see them, or it would just suck because, well, they just wanted to live in the past. So the new album Zeitgeist came out, at least at the time it was new, right? And it didn't have the same impact as the other albums, but the culture had changed. Music, the delivery of it had changed. People were streaming now. You go from something like Napster that allowed you to just take MP3s and make your own mix CDs to, you don't even do that. You just go on an app and listen to something and it's right there. You don't go for physical collections of things anymore. At least that's the way the culture was going with music, because they realized, hey, we're in a microwave generation and we want things now, and we're going to find ways to deliver these things quickly. And you have stuff like Napster and iTunes to blame for that. Spotify, people use that now, and that's how artists are able to connect to their fans. So when it comes to connecting to fans, Billy was never one to really speak to fans back in those days, but suddenly was doing more and more communication because, I guess, from my opinion, this is my opinion, he realized that it wasn't so much the label who was doing everything anymore, right? The labels would give these artists money to, like in advance, to promote their albums, the advertising and all that. But some of these new artists who, were coming out, they didn't have to do that, or they weren't doing that. They were just writing on message boards and forums and actually directly connecting to them. So on one hand, you're paying somebody to take the heat for you if there's blowback, and you would get a response from, the manager. But then if you're in this new age where you're talking directly to them, you've got to read these comments, good or bad. But at least you're cutting out the middleman and you're not having to pay for that, right? There's a price to, that communication. So he was never one to be receptive of that feedback loop. It was just, what he was trying to tell you was, this is what I enjoy doing, this is the music I want to put out, and you either like it or you don't. But the reality was, fans still wanted them to pick up where they thought he left off. But so many years have gone by. You got to realize people change, people grow. There was this mythology of him being this, vampire-like character, right? This dark, sad, depressed man, when really he was just a passionate, sensitive guy who had these feelings that he put out into the universe and felt very highly of them. One could argue pretentious. That's a word I see thrown out a lot when it comes to how people describe him. And I'll just leave it there. I'm just putting that in there to say that the idea of where people felt the music should pick up at was different from not just within the band itself. These forums were very toxic, where it's like, no, it should be Siamese Dream 2, or Melancholy 2, and some people wanted Adore, right? There was that period where Jimmy Chamberlain was fired from the band due to some drugs and whatever, and they changed their sound. They went into more synth and just went away from the drums and the heavy rock because they didn't have a drummer, right? And while that album worked, Billy's thinking, oh, I could maybe do no wrong if everything is able to stick. And I can't speak for him, but the Billy that you hear on these podcasts, they have a 33 podcast where he's like, I'm going to tell you what a real fan is, what a true fan is. My cat is not a true fan, making noise in the background. But what I will say it rubbed me the wrong way enough to make a video, because he's saying a true fan is one that can make or has a history of the band. You know, they're familiar with the records, and pretty much they appreciate what he's doing now and back then. And it's just not, that's not realistic at all, because you have people who could become fans at different times. They might like the new stuff and not like the old stuff, and vice versa. But does that really make them a true fan or not a true fan? I feel like a true fan is one that still may support the band even though they don't like what is currently being put out. That's where I stand. Where do you stand? Because although Adore sold what it sold, you got to look at it like this. That was just the time period we were in. You have plenty of artists who, out of a 20 record album, 20 song album, only 3 of them were worth listening to. But you still bought it because you didn't have things like Spotify and iTunes to like preview the whole thing. The single was just a couple dollars shy of the actual album. So you probably bought the album because there were more songs than just getting a 2 to 3 song single that you would also buy at somewhere like Best Buy, right? So now, if Adore were to come out now, I'm not saying it would be poorly received, but would it sell like it did back then if they were to change? I don't think it would, and that's something that I'm not sure Billy is considering when he makes the comments that he makes on these podcasts. He feels like the fans will catch up later to what he's trying to do. He's got these ideas of these different characters that are part of him, but not all of him. He's telling these stories, these space operas, and while all that's, what it is, the music, sonically is not the same. He's trying different things to appeal to newer audiences because he feels like the older fans should stick around. But I mean, you literally have paid someone to meow in the background of a song. There's a new song he's got called Moss. They put out, so the follow-up to this album is called Autumn, ATUM, and it's got 33 songs, hence the 33 podcast, which is kind of a callback to the song 33 on this album. Yes, song 3 on, you can't see this, but song 3 on disc 2, Twilight to Starlight, is called 33. So he's a numbers guy like I am, and 33, the age of when Jesus passed. That's pretty much kind of what I think he was going with when you think of that title. So 33 songs per album, per album on this 3-disc album, right? I said, well, yeah, they're all 3 different albums within albums, right? So that's what he's got going on now, and he's going to tell you, oh, we actually have a follow-up album we're working on before Autumn is completed. What? So it's completed before they release it all, and it's going to be a rock album. It's like, give me that, Billy. Stop with the synthesizers. I don't want that. Maybe you could say that's not what everyone wants, but I believe a large collective of the fans do not care for that synth stuff. What was that conversation like where you hire this person and say, yeah, I just want you to meow on the song? Really? I'm going to get royalties to just meow, yeah. That's crazy to me. He's got a producer. Yeah, see, she's meowing. Yeah, he's got a producer. I didn't mean for you to get up here. Here, say hi to everybody since you want to interject and meow and everything. Okay. So, he's got a producer, and this person feels like a yes man to me. No disrespect to this guy, but pretty much the reactions of, is this something we've said before? Billy wants a different reaction from this person. If it's something new and hasn't been said before, that's what he believes to be worth making a record versus, oh, you've done that before. But is the song good? I'd rather hear something you said before, but the song's good, than something that you're calling new and avant-garde, but I feel no emotion, no attachment to it. I don't want that. But that's me. That's my opinion. That's my personal choice. But for him to think that these things are good just because they're different. And I'm not saying that's what he's saying, but that's how it feels. That's how it comes off. It's just the wrong message. So when I look back to yesteryear, there's a good 3, 4, you could argue 4.5 albums that I'm like, yeah, yes. Then there's this newer stuff where it's like, hey, there's a couple songs there. Like even Zeitgeist grew on me, but it's more akin to Machina and some of the earlier albums at the first half of, or the first chapter of the Smashing Pumpkins, the first, groupings of them, than this newer stuff, which is, what is this? The name says Smashing Pumpkins, but it doesn't smell or taste like Smashing Pumpkins. It kind of looks like it a little bit, but no. So, it's that age-old argument, which is, what if you had a band that they didn't break up or the lead singer didn't die? If they kept going, would they eventually put out bad music? The same way we say, oh, their careers were so short, so they're legendary because they stopped. Smashing Pumpkins, they didn't cease, they didn't stop. They had a period where they broke up. And maybe you would say after Machina they had really great stuff, but that wasn't the end of these artists. That wasn't the end of their story, at least not for Billy. But Billy's happy now. That's my takeaway. When he says himself he could fake these emotions to make albums like yesteryear, but he's happy now. So him being happy, if this is what he wants to do, then so be it. But don't say that people aren't. Don't give your idea of what a true fan is, because to you feel like a fan is still a fan like they were yesterday and today. But to some people, it's like, I was a fan, but you're not listening. You're tone deaf to what we actually liked about the band. And then what you think is what attracted us to the band is also incorrect. And he wants to be true to himself. If the labels and all those guys that are cultivating money are saying this is what people want, and you're like, no, I'm going to do the other thing, know that there's probably an alternate universe where there's a Billy Corgan who they're telling him, no, just make new stuff. We don't want to hear the old stuff. And he's made a Siamese dream too. So I'm going to think about that and leave y'all with that, because we'll have to wait and see what happens with the rest of Autumn. I do not care for much of what I've heard on that 33 podcast, but just know that he's also promised signed copies, like a vinyl copy on their website, or a link to their website through some other site, where you're going to get the full 33 songs plus 10 songs that won't be released. I personally feel like those 10 songs are going to be better than the whole album, because why else would they not be released unless they were what you actually wanted or what they thought people wanted, and be willing to pay the $100 or whatever it cost. Think about that. And then they're already working on a rock follow-up. I'm like, well, maybe he sings the way he's singing now and it doesn't have the emotion, but I want the guitars at least. The synth stuff is just not cutting it for me. But I've rambled on long enough. This video went on longer than I imagined it would be. If you stayed here the whole time, leave me a like, comment, subscribe, share. Let me know what your favorite Smashing Pumpkins album is. Maybe you're not a fan anymore. Maybe you just like a couple of songs. Don't hesitate to comment there too. Maybe Billy sees this. Maybe Colleen, or I can't remember her name. But there's a podcast, 33 Podcast. Check that out and hear the episode for yourself. It's called Neophyte. That's the first one where the argument started, and then there was a Christmas-themed episode. Because what he does is he'll play the new song, and then later on he'll play an older song. And for me, I'm like, man, this is two different bands. But the girl who's now, in charge of the marketing and the social media stuff, she was a fan just like us. So is she a true fan? She started out born in the melancholy era. So what if she didn't like the old stuff, but she likes the new stuff? My feeling is maybe she likes the new stuff because if she didn't, she wouldn't be in the spot that she's in. But hey, that's just one man's opinion. Let me know yours. I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to, like I said, give me some feedback of your own. and I will see you in the next one. Meow.